When your headlights are on dim, you can only see the shallow perspective of the road and the small snowflakes. But when you turn on your high beams, you can see the snowstorm rushing forward and the deer on the side of the road. The same goes for people and places. You may think you know a situation or a place, but if you don't turn on your bright lights, you really can't see enough. We decided to turn on our brights and to discover Cuba. Cubans are constantly solving problems. They have to. The Cuban economy has been under an international boycott for the last 55 years. When you look around Cuba, you see the repairs and crude fixes. Their cars go back beyond the 1950s. For example, a Ford Etzel, introduced and failed, is still on the road in Cuba as a 5-ton Russian truck. The Cuban people have become inventive. By doing this, they become thinkers and problem solvers. Within the US, old cars have disappeared, thrown away, scrapped. If your toaster oven breaks, you don't consider fixing it. You just toss it out. But within Cuba, the only way is to fix. 1953 was the beginning of the first well-known revolution within Cuba. This revolution sought to solve massive social problems, to free the Cuban people of poverty and slavery, using a well-known method called communism. Discrimination was the main problem. Society had 3 classes: the illiterate poor, the merchant class, and the ultra-rich, most of whom lived in the US. 80% of sugar industry was owned by US corporations. 70% of cattle industry was owned by US citizens. 100% of the electric power and telecommunication was owned by Americans. That class structure would never change as long as the United States controlled the Cuban government at that time, run by Fulgencio Batista. This all changed when Fidel stepped into power. The class structure immediately disappeared when Fidel Castro introduced universal education and a literacy program that brought reading and writing to every single Cuban. So how was Fidel able to change discrimination so rapidly? Fidel immediately enforced non-discrimination laws and an education system that made it possible for all Cubans, no matter what color of their skin and no matter what sex, now had the opportunity to read and write. The United States is still dealing with racism to this day.
Yeah. For example, no discriminate the color.
Yeah.
In Cuba, 1 Negro and 1 Blanco is equal, it's the same.
Yeah.
Because you can go to the hospital and the person most important and more intelligent is a doctor black.
Sí.
No problem.
Soy profesor de filosofía de la Universidad de Ciencias Médicas aquí en Trinidad. Soy máster en la educación superior. Atiendo estudiantes de medicina de 3er año. En mis ratos libres estudio también las religiones africanas y comparto en las mañanas con ustedes.
Every leader has to deal with psychology. Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, came up with the first idea to use the science of psychology for political influence. And in order to keep the fire of the revolution burning in the hearts of the Cuban people, Fidel Castro has used this science for over 57 years. It is the victory of ideas.
In English.
Yeah.
Person think that the revolution is a way of life. It's a way of thinking about the social process. For me, the revolution is an historic concept, a way to make a society in the history, a way to understand the necessity of the Cuban people.
For the Cuban people, the revolution is an idea of change, to make people's lives better. It is a revolution that continually lifts society up, and therefore the revolution must never stop. We were able to open our eyes to Cuba. We were able to get to know the people. And by doing this, we heard it firsthand, and we didn't hear it from the news or the politicians who would spin our way of thinking. Many of us, including myself, fall into a cycle of believing the news. Because it's the news, they should know what they're talking about, right? The main concern for the media is not giving news to the public. It's to stay in business. Become a scientist, become curious, and explore your ideas. Ask questions, become a problem solver. Because if you don't, you will live in a paradise of ignorance, where people will think for you and the world is a closed door.
Ready?
De Alto Cedro voy para Marcané, llego a Puerto, voy para Mayarí. De Alto Cedro voy para Marcané, llego a Puerto, voy para Mayarí. Que te tengo, no te lo puedo negar. Se me sale la babita, yo no lo puedo